Okay, I'm going to be going over some review problems from the whole chapter in this video here, and I'm going to break it into those sections, and then you will have some practice problems to do on your own. So I'm going to start with section 1, and the thing that I want you to remember how to do from this section is how to factor something by removing the greatest common factor. So, for example, if you have something like this, 5x plus 5y, you can take out a 5 from both of them, so your factored form would be 5 times x plus y. If you have something that looks like this, 30a to the third minus 18a squared minus 12a, I would look at all three numbers and see what's the biggest number you could pull out, and look at all the letters and see do they have anything in common. So you could pull out a 6 and an a, and that would leave you with 5a squared minus 3a minus 2. For this last one here, it's just letters, so again, I would just look at each term and see what do they share, like what's the most number of each letter you could pull out. So you can take out an A and a B from both of them, and you're left with A plus B inside the parentheses. Going into section 2, this is when we talked about special products. So we talked about like the difference of two perfect cubes, we talked about writing out a perfect square binomial, and then we also went into the sum and difference of perfect cubes. So if you have two perfect squares like this one, x squared minus 81, we talked about the rules that were given to you is that you have to be able to square root the first term and the second term, and there has to be a minus sign in the middle. So this satisfies all of that, so we just do x minus 9 and x plus 9. Same thing here, you would check and see if you can square root both of the first and the last two terms, which you can. So you'd have 5y and 4 or 2. There is a minus sign in the middle, so you do 5y minus 2, 5y plus 2. Remember, when you factor, one of them should have a minus sign, one of them should have a plus sign. This last one here, it's the same as those first two. It's just written backwards where they have that number or that letter at the end. I'm not going to be too picky about that. If you want to rewrite it, you can. But if you want to just factor this as you see it, that's fine. So it'd be 11 minus 3m and 11 plus 3m. Now we're getting into the ones where you have a trinomial, and so you're trying to see if it's a perfect square trinomial. So you square root the first and the last term, so you get 2x and 3 when you square root the 4x squared and the 9. So 2x and 3 together, if you multiply them, would be 6x. And then if you double that, you should get that middle term, which is the 12x. So because that all works out, you can rewrite this as that 2x plus 3 quantity squared. Remember, you have to be able to square root the first and the last terms, and when you combine them, it has to double to that middle term in order for you to factor it. So for like this one, the first term square root would be 4d, and then the last term would be 5. Now 4d times 5 is already 20d, which is what they have for the middle term, so that one doesn't double. So this one would be prime. Last one here, your first term would be 3x, your last term would just be a y. 3xy doubled is 6xy, so we would write this as 3x minus y squared. Now for those last three, 4, 5, and 6, to determine the sign that you put in the middle, you look at the sign in front of that middle term. So for like number 4, it says plus 12x, so that's why I put a plus sign in between 2x and 3. For 6, you have a minus sign in front of 6xy, so you put a minus sign in between 3x and y. Now, getting into the sum and difference of two perfect cubes. These were the really long written out rules, so make sure that you know those for the test so that you can kind of follow the rules. They're very similar to each other. They just have a lot of sign changes. So like this one, you cube root the first and the second term, so d, and then the cubed root of 729 would be 9. And so following the rule here, you're going to have d plus 9. Then you have the first term squared, so d squared. You stick those two terms together, so minus 9d, and then you square the 9, so that's how I got the 81. For the second one, if you cube root, you should have a 2a and then a 3. This one's a minus sign though, so it changes our signs a little bit. So now I have 2a minus 3, and then 4a squared minus 6a plus 9. From section 3, factoring the trinomials, so we'll just start with these really easy ones where we had to find two numbers that multiply to the last and they have to add to the middle. So you need two numbers that multiply to 21, add to 10, That would be 7 and 3. So x plus 7, x plus 3. For this one, you need two numbers that multiply to negative 18, add to a negative 17. So you're going to get negative 18 and positive 1. And for this one, you need two numbers that multiply to negative 30, add to a 1. So you get x plus 6, x minus 5. Now, if you have one that has a number other than 1 in front of x squared, this is when you have to do the longer steps. So we have to take, that should say a times c, so 4 times 15, which would be 60. So you need two numbers that multiply to 60 and add to a negative 23, and that would be negative 20 and negative 3. So you rewrite that middle term using those two numbers that you just found. We group them, so group the first two, group the last two, pull out their common factor next. So the common factor from the first grouping would be 4x, and from the second one would be a negative 3. So you can see how I've pulled out 4x and negative 3, and I'm left with x minus 5 when I do that. So to write my final answer, I have 4x minus 3 and x minus 5. So I have put up some review problems for you to do from all three sections. That's on the homework website, so make sure you go and do those. I'm also going to be putting on a practice quiz for you on the quizzes website, so if you want to practice that before we take our test on Friday, you can do that as well. If you have any questions or need any help, please let me know. Also, feel free to go back and watch any of the older videos if you feel like you need to refresh your memory on some of those rules that I talked about, with especially in section 2. That's when we talked a lot about the special products. So if you don't remember some of those, go back and watch that video again to kind of get a refresher on that. So let me know if you need any help or if you have any questions.